listening to Second Chance Ministry Radio.
You are listening to Mission Audio's production of Everything is Possible by Jen Bricker. This book is read by Jen Bricker. This audiobook is dedicated to the glory of God. May this audiobook touch the lives of millions around the world. Chapter 1. The Baby Born Without Legs. The Lord does not look at the things people look at. People look at the outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart. 1 Samuel chapter 16, verse 7. I came into this world with no name, literally a nobody. My Romanian birth parents essentially abandoned me, leaving me behind at the hospital. And yet, I don't hate them. As hard as that is for people to understand, I have no anger toward them. Instead, I'm thankful. Thankful that because of what they did, I wound up in a loving home with my parents, the Brickers, who supported me and taught me that my life, every life, has a purpose. Sure, it was a strange way to start life. In a tiny hospital room in Salem, Illinois, my biological mother, Camellia, delivered me by cesarean section. I was born with big dark brown eyes, a head of thick black hair, dark brows and lashes, and very tan skin. I was also born with my heart on the right side of my chest instead of the left. Many nurses got a scare when they tried to find my heartbeat with a stethoscope. I measured a whopping 13 inches, 1 inch longer than a ruler. Ironically, the hospital closed shortly after I was born. My family teases that after I was born, no one could top me, so they had to close up shop. Camellia never actually laid eyes on me. That's because my birth father, Dimitri, didn't allow it, not even for a split second. A relative says the doctor who delivered me, also Romanian, told him I would die. Maybe he thought it would be too painful. Maybe he was trying to spare her pain or grief or regret. Maybe he just hit the panic button or felt ill-equipped emotionally and financially to care for a child who had special needs. Maybe he thought he was doing me a favor. I don't know, and I don't pretend to know what was going through his head at that time. All I know is that he took one look at this tiny infant with two appendages where her legs were supposed to be and decided she'd be better off with someone else. So no, I'm not angry, as crazy as that sounds. I don't blame my birth parents or judge them or hold any grudges. How could I when they gave me the greatest gift of all, a family that needed me as much as I needed them? My parents were honest with me from the start about my adoption. They didn't want me to feel hurt or abandoned or to hate my birth parents. They told me, Jennifer, you have to understand, your biological parents were from a different country with a different mindset. You didn't walk in their shoes and you don't know the real reason they gave you up. Whatever it is, it doesn't matter. This was exactly how God planned for it to be. You were an answered prayer, a miracle for us. They gave us a gift. They gave us you. It took a while for my adoptive parents to find their little gift, though. A social worker first placed me with the foster family, a kind, loving couple who I called Nana and Papa. I was with them for 3 months, but we stayed in touch for several years until they passed away. They named me Holly Ann. Papa worked on the railroad and always wore overalls, so I fit neatly in his bib in front, like a little baby kangaroo in a pouch. We would watch Alf, a weird little alien life form puppet, for those of you who are not around in the late 80s, on TV, and I had a little Alf figurine I carried around everywhere with me. They made sure I was secure and content, and months after I became a Bricker, my parents still took me back to visit them. They were the first people who loved me, and they truly had the biggest hearts. They fostered kids who were hard to place, and saw a lot of sad, unfortunate children over the years. I wasn't one of those, despite my obvious health issues. Given my specialness, you'd have thought that placing me in a permanent home would have been tough. But it wasn't. More than 300 couples wanted me. I think about that sometimes. I could have been 300 other Jens. It's almost like a math probability equation. If Jen went with X and Y, what would she equal? The way I was raised helped make me the person I am today. I am grateful, so grateful that God had this plan. Praying for a miracle. At the time of my birth, Sharon and Gerald Bricker, my soon-to-be parents, were living in Hardinville, Illinois, tiny town in the middle of nowhere on the eastern side of the state. They already had 3 boys, Greg, Brian, aka Bubba, and Brad, who were 14, 12, and 10 years old. Nonetheless, they desperately wanted a baby girl. My mother had to have a hysterectomy because she had cysts on her ovaries, and she knew she would never be able to give birth to any more children. So she asked God for a miracle. She kept her faith, believing all along. There must be one little girl in the world who needs this family. The woman seriously had the patience of a saint. One day, a friend who was adopting called her to say she'd heard about me. My mom knew at that moment her prayers had been answered, so she told my dad, and he was as excited as she was. Then they both ran it by my brothers. My parents asked Greg, my oldest brother, "How would you feel about bringing your date to the house and introducing her to your sister who has no legs?" Greg didn't even have to think about it. He said, "If someone can't accept her, I wouldn't want to date her." They went through every scenario with my brothers to make sure they were okay with it. Then, when the whole family was on board, they put the plans in motion. My mom said she was 100% honest. She told the social worker all the reasons why our family didn't need more children and all the reasons why, in her heart, she knew she had to have me. It took 2.5 months before my parents could actually meet me. During that whole time of waiting, they never saw a single picture of me, which was on purpose. The adoption agency and social workers wanted to be sure how the prospective new parents would react after meeting me and how they'd handle changing and feeding me. My mom says she was a nervous wreck the night before, tossing and turning in bed and worrying about how I'd take to them. All those worries melted away as soon as they walked into the door of my foster family's home. My face lit up in a huge grin. My mom says at that moment she knew it was meant to be. It felt like she'd found the missing piece to her soul, and the smile on my face said, "You're finally here." It was an instant connection, and taking care of me came to my parents instinctually. While my foster parents had struggled to change my diapers, I was a slippery little thing, apparently. My mom was a pro. "It's so easy," she exclaimed. "There are no little legs in my way." From that day on, I was Jennifer Bricker. My brothers were allowed to name me, but there was one catch. They had to agree on a name. They argued over it for hours until one of them said, "Jennifer," and they all kind of nodded in agreement. My mom tells me I went through a little bit of an adjustment period while getting to know my new family. For 2 weeks, I refused to even crack a smile. Then one day, one of my brothers sneezed and I burst into hysterical laughter. So he kept sneezing over and over so they could get their first picture of me smiling. And that was it. I was a jolly little baby from that day forward. My brothers each had their own little thing that they would do with me. Greg liked to rest me on his chest when he was doing homework. Bubba would stick me in front of his bib overalls and carry me around. And Brad always fed me my bottle. They were so excited to have a little sister. I was like a shiny new toy. The social workers made an appointment at the Cardinal Clinic in St. Louis, Missouri for my parents to take me for a comprehensive medical evaluation. The prognosis was bleak. The doctors wanted to make me a bucket to sit in. In their opinions, I would never be able to sit up, crawl around, or move from place to place at all without being carried. My mom sat in the doctor's office and cried her heart out, but my dad did not agree with their prognosis. "No," he insisted. "That's not what she's about. We don't accept that." So they took me to a new set of doctors, this time at the Shriners Hospital for Children in St. Louis. "I want to know," my dad asked them. "Will she be able to sit up? What does her future look like?" This time the news was encouraging. The doctor smiled and said, "Mr. and Mrs. Bricker, this little girl is going to do things you never even imagined would be possible." But yes, they could imagine it. And from then on, we all had the attitude of, let's go for it. Nothing would stand in my way. My parents never held the reins too tight, but they also didn't let me fly in the wind with no rules. What went for my brothers went for me. Just because I had no legs didn't mean I received special privileges or treatment. I was going to grow up a normal little girl, and my parents would never accept anything less. They didn't coddle me or speak to me in baby talk. I was a talker, and very vocal about what I wanted from the moment I opened my mouth. It started with me pulling myself up in the crib. "Hold you, Mommy," I would call, meaning hold me. Not only could I sit up, but I also could move. Fast. Faster than my poor parents could keep up with me. My mom called me Mouse because I would scoot about with lightning speed. I used to pull myself along with my little arms and leave a trail of pink Pampers shredded on the ground behind me. My brothers had me practically jumping off the couch from the moment I could crawl around. They put pillows down to break my fall, but they'd egg me on. I never could turn down a dare. I was fearless. Before I was 5, I needed 2 surgeries. One to remove a growth plate, a partial bone growing down from my hip, the other to remove the 2 appendages so I could better tolerate my prosthetics. My family nicknamed the appendages my flippers. One had the cutest big toe and a little arch and a heel. The other was a little more unformed. As a baby, I loved music and would use them to keep time with the beat. Because I was so young, I don't remember much about those times going into the hospital, but my parents tell me I was never afraid, never sad to spend time there. The nurses all loved me, and I assured them, "Don't worry, I'm fine." That was a tough one. My VIPs. In these chapters, you'll meet the most important people in my life as they share their memories of yours truly. I'm humbled and a little mortified, but mostly humbled. My mom, Sharon Bricker. When I told my father, Noble Waldrop, we were adopting a baby girl, he hesitated. Not because of the way she was born, but because he wasn't sure he could love her the same as his other grandkids. She wasn't his blood. Well, that changed in a heartbeat. I took her over to my parents' house, and he fell head over heels for her. They had a very tight, special bond, especially during his last days. Jennifer brought him joy and comfort. He would get depressed being on an oxygen tank, and my mom would call and ask that we bring her by. Whenever we did, he'd immediately perk up. I remember she would sing to him to lift his spirits. She was the best kind of medicine for whatever ailed him. I remember watching her and thinking how she had a natural ability to connect with people. Today, whenever she speaks in front of a crowd, it's as if she's talking personally to each and every person in that room. She has more friends than anyone I know, and it's because anyone who meets her instantly loves her. I think of her with my father and how I knew way back then she had a God-given gift for inspiring people. I can do that. As I got a little bigger, my personality really started to shine through. I was trouble with a capital T. Growing up with 3 older brothers certainly contributed to this. Greg taught me to rock out to Garth Brooks. He also took me on many of his dates, probably because I was such an upfront little squirt. I'd give him my honest opinion. All my brothers would brag to their friends about how strong I was, and as a result, few would ever take on the challenge of arm wrestling me. They didn't want to get whipped by a little girl. As an adult, I can see that growing up with brothers has helped me understand guys a lot better. To be totally honest, they're easier to get along with than most girls. Less drama. Most of my friends in my life now are guys, and almost all my roommates have been as well. I guess I miss living in a house filled with men. I also have a sister, Jody, my dad's daughter from a previous relationship before he married my mom. She's about 15 years older than I am. I didn't get to see her very much growing up because she lived a few states away. But she would always try and remember my birthday. She would also come to see us for Christmas, which was always awesome. As I've gotten older, I've been able to see her a bit more because of my travel, and I try to let her know whenever I'm in Colorado so we can meet up. As a kid, anything physically challenging, sport, game, tree to climb, had my name on it. My parents tell me this funny story, how when I was a baby, I loved water and they wanted me to swim. They put little pool floaties on my arms, and when they lowered me into the water and let go, my butt floated straight up and my head went underwater. It scared my parents to death. Clearly, regular floaties weren't going to work, so they got me a one-piece suit with a little inner tube attached to it. That managed to keep my booty underwater. When I was about 6, I decided I'd rather dive down deep than float up top. I jumped in, sans floaties, and my parents let me go. Turns out I was a natural swimmer. In 4th grade, my school held swimming classes at the local college, Lincoln Trail College in Robinson, where I placed into advanced swimming. I loved holding my breath underwater, and one day while I was swimming at the city pool in Robinson, I decided to challenge myself. How long could I stay at the bottom and not bob up for air? Reggie, the lifeguard, thought I was drowning and dove in to rescue me. I remember he dove in, lifted me up, and then held me above the water. "What are you doing?" I asked, laughing. He was embarrassed, but I didn't mind it one bit. I had a huge crush on Reggie, and anytime he wanted to save me, I was fine with that. My parents trusted I always knew what I could and couldn't handle. They let me leap into the pool and leap into my life. They treated me like a person instead of a child, even at an early age. I think that's why I learned to talk and spell and read so quickly. Everyone in my family did. So it was expected of me as well. I loved Dr. Seuss books and could recite Marvin K. Mooney, "Will You Please Go Now?" and Green Eggs and Ham by heart. When my kindergarten teacher asked if I could read them to her, I declared, absolutely. But really, I just committed them to memory, from my family reading them to me over and over. I've kept this a secret until now. My teacher thought I was a genius. My parents also never worried about what people would think of me. Initially, my mom said this little prayer, "God, please let her face be pretty so people don't notice that she has no legs." For the record, she says God came through on that as well. But she's a little biased. And I guess I hadn't learned humility yet. When people would stop and tell me, "Oh, aren't you cute?" I'd answer back, "I know it." My mom would turn 20 shades of red. "Jennifer," she would tell me, "we don't say that, we say thank you." So then I would reply, "Thank you, I know it." People simply forgot, literally, that I was missing my lower limbs. In fact, my mom's best friend since high school has a daughter 3.5 months younger than I am, and she was always sending clothes that her child had outgrown. One day, my mom received a box of these hand-me-downs and opened them up to find an entire pile of socks and shoes. She called her friend laughing and asked, "And what am I supposed to do with these?" Her friend was shocked and embarrassed. She'd completely forgotten I didn't need them. But that's how it always was. People in my small town were so comfortable with me that they quickly forgot I was different. And because they forgot, I did as well. I got my first set of prosthetic legs when I was a toddler, sometime around 2 years old. At first I screamed and hated how they pinched and poked and weighed me down. They were so foreign, so heavy and bulky, and I was too little to understand why my parents were pinning them on me. As I got older and became used to them, I loved them. I could wear fancy socks and shoes. I wore them to kindergarten. One day I went to the bathroom and left them there by accident. A classmate went in after me and returned to the classroom white as a ghost. "There are legs in the bathroom," he cried to the teacher, who promptly took me aside and reminded me not to leave them lying around. As I got older, I became more active and didn't want to wear the prosthetics much at all. Eventually, I wore them solely for dress-up. The first sport I participated in was softball, which I played in 1st through 3rd grade. I had so much hair that the helmets barely fit my head because of my giant ponytail. My brothers and coaches taught me to hit to the third baseline to give myself more time to reach the bases. But we all soon realized I was lightning fast. All you really saw was a trail of dust in my wake. I remember one time I hit the ball right to the first baseman. No one thought I would make it to the base in time, but I kept running. I didn't take my eyes off that base, and as the first baseman was trying to pick up the ball, I dove and touched the bag. Safe. It was a great lesson and a reminder for me. I should never take my eyes off of the goals or God's promises for my life. Even when something looks absolutely impossible, game over, in that very last second, things can change. While softball was about being close to the ground, the trampoline was about soaring to the sky. I played this game called Popcorn, in which I challenged people to see who could bounce the highest. I always won. I decided I could play basketball too, and my forte was stealing the ball. It was definitely harder to make baskets because I was so low to the ground, but I just had to throw much harder. I also decided to try volleyball in 6th grade because Mr. Korn was the coach, and he was effortlessly cool. He taught art as well, and I've always been drawn to artists, although my own artistic soul hadn't quite emerged yet. Because he saw I needed to build my confidence on the volleyball court, he definitely did not take it easy on me. I was extremely self-conscious and nervous about serving. Since I was so low to the ground, it was difficult to serve all the way from the back of the court. Time after time, my ball wound up in the net. So he taught me to stand sideways and hit the ball that way. Of course, I wasn't the star spiker of the team, but I was great as middle back. Right where the ball dropped low, guess who was already low and didn't have to fall to her knees? This girl. I think everyone who knew me was just waiting to see what I would do next. I kept doing things I wasn't supposed to be able to do. My parents were the only ones not surprised by my physical shenanigans. When I wanted to try something new and said in frustration, "I can't do it," they would scold me. "Can't" is a bad word in our home, and you shouldn't use it, Jennifer, they would say. So I grew up embracing the idea that I could do anything if I set my mind to it. Just like the train in one of my favorite stories. The little engine that could. I think I can. I think I can. To this day, I love the lessons that story teaches. Be courageous, persevere, believe. As we try new things, we discover how strong we are and realize the only limits are the ones we impose on ourselves. One day I told my parents I wanted to go roller skating, never even considering that I might need feet to put on roller skates. When you live in the middle of nowhere, you have limited activities, so the roller rink was the place to be. I asked my parents to take me to the store to buy a pair of skates, which they did, without any hesitation. The sales clerk must have thought we had lost our minds. What is this girl going to do with these roller skates? If I thought I could skate, then my parents believed not only that I could, but also that I would. I put the skates on my hands and off I went. It took me a while to make it all the way around the rink, and even longer to learn how to skate backwards. But I simply refused to quit trying. And when I did make it around, everyone applauded. I felt like such a star. My favorite moment at the rink was when they called limbo. Because I was so small, I could limbo like nobody's business. How low could I go? They'd never seen anything like it. Seeing through God's eyes. I had the happiest, most normal childhood. I collected Beanie Babies, Polly Pockets, and fuzzy-haired troll dolls by the dozens. One day I was walking in town with one of my favorites, a troll with bright blue hair, and a lady on the street remarked, "What an ugly baby you have there." I swear my mom wanted to smack her because she saw how upset her words made me. "Mama," I wailed, "she called my baby ugly." My mother took me aside and gently explained that every creature is beautiful in God's eyes. "Your baby isn't ugly," she told me. "That lady was just having a bad day." And that's how I grew up, knowing I was beautiful and perfect in God's eyes. Our physical presence is only part of who we are as human beings. What's inside is just as important, and maybe more so. My parents took me into their home and their lives with the fullest of hearts and the biggest of faiths. They knew life wouldn't always be easy for me. They knew I would experience frustration and pain and people who saw me in the way that lady saw my troll doll. They also knew they couldn't always protect me. I had to learn to fend for myself. However, they believed God gave me to them for a reason, and they felt an enormous responsibility to prepare me as best they could to tackle whatever challenges came my way. Can't was never an option. Fear was never an option. I would rather fall flat on my face than regret not trying. And I'm blessed with parents who were courageous enough to let me try, let me fail, and let me find my way and my trust in God. My parents were very open about where I came from and the fact that I was adopted. They never thought it should be a source of shame or embarrassment. Some kids are born to their parents, but others are chosen. My mom says that one day when I was little, I asked her, "Mommy, do you think my parents gave me up because I didn't have legs?" She thought long and hard before answering. "Jennifer," she said softly, "Mommy's tummy was broken, and God found you a really nice lady with a nice tummy so she could hold you until I could get to you." I never questioned it again. It made perfect sense to me, and honestly, it still does. Believe it. These are things I've come to know and believe with all my heart and soul. Think about them. Consider how they might apply to your own life or situation, and use them whenever and wherever you see fit. I'm not going to school you or tell you what to do. That's just not who I am. Although my brothers might disagree since they think I can be pretty bossy. But I will tell you this. All the knowledge in the world won't do you any good if you sit on it. When you learn something, you need to put it into play. Otherwise, it's like holding the basketball and never taking that jump shot. Everything happens for a reason. Trust that every experience, good, bad, or ugly, shapes the person you are for the better. Every mistake or misfortune is an opportunity to grow and learn. It's a matter of seeing the bigger picture, the purpose you are working toward, and how each thing you go through is a part of the journey. I was born without legs. I could choose to have a woe is me attitude, and I don't think anyone would hold that against me. But I don't. Ever. Instead, I see my body as a huge advantage because it provides me with the opportunity to have an extremely unique perspective on life. It also allows God to work through me to inspire and motivate others. Sure, my life is a little more difficult in some aspects. I'd be lying if I said otherwise. But it would be too easy to go down that negative road. Instead, I prefer to focus on all the positives that having no legs has brought into my life. The opportunities, the people, the chance for my voice to be heard. And when I do think of all those things, the good overwhelmingly overshadows the bad. Bottom line, if I hadn't been born without legs, I wouldn't have the life I have now. And I certainly wouldn't be recording this audiobook.
You are listening to Second Chance Ministry Radio.